All right now we're going to take a look at the Charge Master, and what we're going to look at today is what is the charge you provide for your service, and what does that even mean? So a few objectives. I want you to understand usual and customary. I want to understand where you get a charge from, that you just don't make up charges, and how to properly discount services off those charges. So just a few objectives that you can read there. So what are we applying a charge to? We're going to take a look at our CPT codes. CPT codes define everything that you do in a five-digit numeric value to me. So when you see an office visit, there's a value for that. That's your CPT code. There's also codes called HCPCS codes. The HCPCS codes are your J codes, your A codes, the D codes, the S codes, all the different descriptor codes that are a alpha numeric code, where a CPT code is going to be a five-digit numeric code. For each one of these codes, there are a unique set of descriptions about what that is and a value assigned to that. So let's take a look at a couple here. If I'm going to do an inpatient hospital visit in the hospital, and I'm a nurse practitioner and I'm going to round and do my initial visit, I'm going to do a 99222, which is the middle of the road of the 3-level series. My total work RVU is going to be a 4.08 national number. If I'm going to do a visit in my outpatient visit with an established patient in an office setting, 99213, middle of the road, there's 5 different levels, but I'm just picking the 3. That has a value of 2.196. Destruction of benign lesion, when I burn off your wart, I'm going to get a value of 3.438 on top of that. So you're thinking, well, wait a second, I understand what all these values mean. Every CPT code has 3 components. It has a work component, which is your effort, a practice expense, which is all the stuff around you, and then the malpractice, which is the risk. So let's take a look at transitional care. Transitional care management, we know, requires 90 minutes of nursing time, non-face-to-face, non-nurse practitioner, non-doctor time of the nursing staff in the practice to make that successful or as part of the service. Well, look at the value it's attributed. Its practice expense has a 2.678. It is a higher value than the nurse practitioner physician's labor at 2.163. So looking at those two numbers, it's showing you they're valuing the more time and energy spent by non-physician nurse practitioner time, which is being done by the practice. When you always go in and they say, I saw a patient, you saw a patient, we're equal. No, because if I saw a new patient and say I bid a level 3, my work effort as a nurse practitioner is going to get a value of 1.456. If you saw a patient as an established patient, you get a value of 0.994. Well, you can say, okay, great. So what's that mean? That means the new patient had more effort and work output by you as a nurse practitioner than an established patient, both level 3s. So we did not see 1 and 1 were both equal. I saw more if I saw the new patient because I got a 1.45 value. You saw less because you had a 0.994 value. So you think, well, I don't get it. Where are we going? Start multiplying those by dollars, and now you start understanding. So that's kind of just some of the comparison of what the work or relative value units are. Every single CPT code and HCPCS code has a work, practice expense, and malpractice that when added together equal your total work RVU. So I'm going to be chatting here in a second when we start looking at, well, we need to set charges for when I go and see an inpatient hospital, what am I going to charge for that? And same with subsequent hospital care, and same with my new patient. Each one of those CPT codes, I need to charge for it. So let's go on and just take a look here in a moment and take a look at what are some of the considerations that we need to take a look at when we go to set a charge for those CPT codes. One, we want to look at usual and customary. What is everybody else charging for it? Well, if all of us are charging $5 for an inpatient hospital visit, and that's what all of us charge, that's going to become usual and customary, and that's going to be used as the basis for our payment in 3, 4, or 5 years. If all of us are charging $1,000, then that becomes usual and customary. Or what if you charge $250 and I charge $1,000 and he charged $600? That's where you end up with your percentiles. So usual and customary does have an impact on that. Charges that's too high, you can make disputes with payers. I'm charging $1 million for my inpatient consult or my subsequent hospital visit. And no, you're not, because the payers are going to dispute that. But then if you say to charge too low, such as Medicare allows $100 for something and you only charge $75, you're never going to get to the allowed rate someone would pay you. So you've got to be considerate about that too, to make sure you don't go too high or you go too low. Well, where do you get some of this data? Well, you buy it. It's data that exists. Every claim that goes out the door has a charge value on it. That charge data is compressed and merged and combined. For example, our firm, we buy $600 million of charges from nearly 150 payers to kind of come up with what does UCR look like. Is a charge too high? Well, yeah, if I'm charging $100 for everything and then next year I just get mad and say I'm going to charge $500 for the same thing. Well, Office Inspector General goes, no, you really can't do that because that's substantially in excess of what's usual and customary as defined by you. You can't just get mad and then triple your charge master the following year. That'll get you in trouble. So there are some kind of limitations on that kind of stuff. The other thing is there's only one charge. Now, you might get paid 19 million different ways from 13 different payers, but you only have one charge. And actually, in some states, it is a Class B misdemeanor to say, my initial hospital visit, which was that 99222, has a charge of $60. Oh, but when it comes to so-and-so, I'm making that charge $99. While you have the same exact product and service defined by that one code, you can't charge different amounts for it to different people and stay out of trouble. There's one charge. Now, you're probably sitting there going, like, we ever get our charge, does it really matter? Well, it does matter because the reimbursement rates that you're paid off of that charge are a factor of that. In the state of Missouri, workers' comp pays 70% of bill charges. So where do you put in your charge? Oh my God, they pay 70% of bill charges, and I'm going to charge $1,000 for things that are, that I want to charge because I want that $700. But that's not what you can do. You've got to make sure that it's priced right and it's fair market. So yes, charges do matter, and there are networks that still pay a percent of bill charges on things. So what are the data elements we look at when we set a charge? Well, I just said in consideration, I've got to look at what everyone else is doing. I don't go ask the neighbor down the street and say, hey, what are you charging? Because chances are he didn't go through a formal process to take a look at it. So you're, bad data in, garbage out kind of approach. So buy the data or get access to the data and look at what's the regional national percentiles. Where are things? Then I'm going to look at what's the national commercial payment considerations. What are people typically paying for this nationally? Another source of data you buy. Doesn't exist for every service, but you get it for a lot of the services. Then I'm going to look at, Medicare is sort of a baseline. Everyone seems to judge everything off of Medicare. So what is Medicare's national rate? What is Medicare's rate geographically adjusted based on the cost index? And then, of course, you can't go set a charge if you don't consider cost. Now, there are direct costs. That's easy. But then there's, what is the cost for an office visit? So you've got to take into consideration your cost structures when you go in to set a charge. So let's take a look at this one more time. Here I've got my CPT codes, and I have this total work RVU. So if I add up 300 patients, so I take 300 new patients, multiply it by 3.284, I get 985. 2,500 established patients, multiply my 2196 times 2,500, I get 5,400. I do all of these CPT code things I did. I burned off 15 cases of wort. So what am I going to do? I'm going to take 15 and I'm going to multiply it by my 3.438. And I'm going to come up with, I did 16,700 things, relative value in my practice. Well, that's all great, but how much did it cost to run your practice that year? So let's take a look at that. It costs a median total cost for primary care practice is $696,722. Let's just say $700,000. So if I take $700,000 and I divide it by my everything we did in the entire practice this year, my total per cost per RVU divided by the 16,700 is $41.92 per RVU. So my cost is at least $41.92 times that RVU value for the services I need to get. So this is just one way to take a look at how much does it cost you to do an office visit. It showed you that on this last slide, I showed you right here, you got a lot of expense tied up in your practice expense, not just you, but the actual nursing staff and people in the practice, the cost of that service for the practice. So you have to look at the total RVU, not just work RVU. Work RVU is what we look at when I want to compare you as a nurse practitioner against you as a nurse practitioner and who gets the performance bonus and who had more effort and work. Well, clearly this person at the 1.45 had more effort and work than the 0.99 guy. So this is how we compare you, but when I'm looking at a charge overall, I need to look at the whole picture because I need to include my staff. So that's when we look at the total RVU is used when we use the set charges. Okay, so what's this really look like? Now this is going to be an expensive grid here. I'll come back to that in a second. Actually, I'm going to go back to it real fast. So right here, my 99203, remember right here my 3.284? And then on my 99213, my 2.196. On this next grid, those two numbers are right here. I have my 99213 is my 2.159. 203 is 3.284. So right there is my RVU. So let me just go back one more time. When I showed you this code, my total RVU using all these things had these two numbers. I translated those two numbers right here. Okay. So what this shows me is for this code, 99213, the 50th regional percentile nationally is $99.57 as a charge. Not a reimbursement, but a charge. Newark, because it happened to be the data I had, is $113. So that would say that if I want to be at the 50th percentile nationally or regionally, I should be between $99 and $113 on this charge. If I look at the national payment consideration, it sits at $114. Well, wait a minute. If the national commercial payments are $114 on average, I sure don't want to be charging $99 or $90 or $78, which is what the Medicare allowable rate is. I need to be above that. If I look at the 75th percentile, where's the 75th percentile of all this data I bought? Well, regionally, it's $140 or $139.10. Nationally, it's $120. So if I want to be in the 75th percentile, I should be at $120, $139 for this level of visit. And if I want to be at the 95th percentile, where everybody else in the market's charging in the Newark area, I could be at $147 or $150. All right, so why don't I just set it at, goodness gracious, why don't I just set it at the 114 rate? Well, let's go back and look at our cost. Remember when I went back here and I looked at my cost, and my cost said that I have $700,000 of practice costs. My total RVU is $16,700, so my cost is $41.92. So at no time should I ever go below $41.92, which is my cost per charge. Okay, so if I did $41.92 multiplied by 2.1959, that says that I should never accept anything below $92.05 for this service. But wait, that means I should never accept Medicare's allowable rate of $78.91. Well, no, you've got to look at it. $78.91 is what Medicare pays, and I will agree. In that analogy, Medicare patients are not going to make your practice make money. But if you have a lot of this commercial business up here at 114, then you might be able to cover your cost at the 92.05 number. But wait, I can't charge 92.05 because I need to get that 115. Remember we talked about that conversion factor? So let's go back a couple slides. And remember the conversion factor right here on costs said average factor of 2.5 times the cost with a floor of like 1.5 times cost when you're looking at the cost per RVU. So if I did 1.5 times, if I use a 1.5 times the cost, I'd be at 62.87. I hope you're following me. You might have to listen to this twice. So 62.87 would say I can never accept anything lower than 138.06, or I want my charge to be 138.06. I'm okay with that. So let me say I'm going to put my recommended charge at 140. I'm okay with 140. Well, you could say, well, I want to be at the 95th percentile and go 150. You know what? I could probably defend a $150 charge on this with a straight face as much as I can justify a $140 charge with a straight face. What I do know is when I charge $140 for this, I'm going to get paid $78 by Medicare. Perfect. And I know that National payment consideration is 114, so it's still below my 140. So at 140, I believe I can actually capture all the possible money on the table, not leave any money on the table, but not have a charge that's so ridiculous that it's above the 100th percentile or 300th percentile, because I know the 95th percentile in Newark's 147, which is about 150, so I know 140 is a good number, 150 is a good number. I actually took a rational approach and just didn't grab 140 out of the sky. Now, what if I was a practice and I just was charging $72 or $70 for a level 2-3 visit on established patients? I can't charge $70. I would be leaving $8.91 every time I saw a Medicare patient. That's dumb. So that's the kind of way you got to look at charge setting. Let's look at the 99203 over here. Well, if I use my 4192 cost per RVU and I do my 1.5 factor, I need to be at about a $206 is where I should be sitting as a charge for my business and my practice. Well, the 75th percentile is 197 or 200. The national data says 197. So this time I'm actually higher than the 75th where I wasn't on the 213. But I'm still lower than the 95th percentile at 226. So I know I'm at $210 because I'm going to round up because I want to keep life easy for me. I know I'm in a good range where my $210 charge is not above the 95th percentile. It's about in line with the 75th. I know using my cost factors, which are in yellow for my practice unique to me, that I should be at about 206. So 210 is actually a pretty decent number. I can defend that and argue that as usual and customary because of where, one, the percentiles sit of the purchase data that exists, and I'm looking at also Medicare's all the way down here in these low numbers, and I always have to make sure I stay higher. My national payment consideration is 171 on a level 3 new patient. At 210, my recommended charge up here, or even at 206, I'm above my 171, so I know I'm going to be able to capture all the money from those payers. So I could argue that I should be at 210 to 226, give or take, a few dollars in there. Now, why am I not just using 206.47 and 138.06? Just basic simplicity. Why on earth would I want all these extra change in pennies when I'm trying to reconcile my books? I always round to the nearest $5, or if it's less than $1, increments of quarters, just to keep bookkeeping easy. So that way it's easier to multiply when I just use my charges. So again, the way we're approaching this when we're looking at charges are I'm going to look at my national and regional data. I'm going to take a look at what my costs are in operating my business. Now, if this was an immunization, I wouldn't be as concerned about my cost per RVU as I would be what is my cost for that drug? What is the cost of that injection? That plays a different factor, and obviously your numbers are a lot smaller, but that's what I would be plugging in here instead of the cost of RVU. I don't really care about it at that point, but I want to know what the cost of that invoice cost is for that drug. So I've taken into consider the regional stuff, I've taken into consider my geographic pricing index, I've taken into consider my national payment, commercial payment consideration, and put that together to come up with what my recommended charge is. So what's the data analysis kind of show me? My charge needs to be, I apply a multiplier against my cost to come up with that. I round it to the $5 increments. That was the one actually in the prior slide that showed the 140 and 210. We should always be higher than the 50th percentile. This charge right here at 140, 210 better always be higher than your 50th percentile figures here of 99 and 113, here of 159 and 175. There is absolutely no reason your charge, not what you're accepting as payment, but your charge should ever be below the 50th percentile regionally or nationally. That should be a component. New technology manufacturing, recommended charges to the practice. That's an important factor as well. New technology, you have to take into consideration of the manufacturers. There's no CPT codes. There's no history. It's a brand new technology. So how do you figure out what the charge is? Because it's brand new. There's no history because everything I've presented so far has taken historical information, except one piece. What's the one piece of historical information that new technology is not going to impact? Cost. So I'll take the manufacturer's recommended charge of a quadrillion dollars for this thing, and then I'll look at my cost to make sure that a quadrillion dollars is better than the cost in running my practice. Combine the two, and then I come up with my charge. But there you're going to have to lean on the manufacturer of the new technology. Then there's other things that create changes in your charges. As an example, modifier 22. Good God, what's that mean? Well, what modifier 22 does is says, I performed this procedure or this surgery or this heart cath, and oh my gosh, it just was so much harder than it usually would be. And it took me so much energy and effort, and it was just a bigger deal to do this basic appendectomy than normal. Well, there's a way to say that. And you say that with a modifier 22. So you take the regular old heart surgery or appendectomy and you plug a little 22 modifier on it, and you just said, hey, this procedure was performed where the services were significantly a lot more work than usual. Now, of course, you're going to have to defend it with medical records, and the health plan is going to have to review it and make their own determination. But because of that extra energy, a charge should be higher than the charge of the normal appendectomy. So we usually say when in those situations you do a 1.5% factor, add 50% onto that to give that little boost in extra effort. So these are some of the things that we look at when we go to set a charge. I will take a break here, and then we'll talk about how do I discount the charge. Because just because I am charging $140 for this and $210 for this, does that mean that's what the private pay patient walking in the door is going to pay me? No. Does that mean when Medicare walks in the door, they're going to pay me $140? No. We see right here, if you're in the rest of New Jersey, like Camden, you're going to get $78.91. So wait a second. If I have one charge, what's it really mean? Well, I want to review how that charge gets discounted legally, because you only have one charge and then you discount off of that. So hopefully that makes some sense, and I look forward to the next quick little section here with you, and we'll get started right in a second.